Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to get started in just about a minute or two, so we'll be talking to you real soon. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for today's webinar. A couple quick things for everybody to know. One, we are recording, so if you need to leave or you have a colleague who's unable to join, you will be able to hear this later on. Two, we will have time at the end for questions, so please, as soon as you think of one, go right ahead and put it into that question panel. There's also a very short survey at the very end when I close this out, just asking what you thought and what you'd like to learn more about. So if you're interested in these future sessions and what you can learn, just let us know then. In the meantime, I don't want to take up too much more time, so I'd like to kick this over to Oscar to get us started. Oscar.
Hey, thanks, Max. Welcome, everyone. Today we have some really great stuff to show you. Just wanted to thank you for being here today. And last time we walked you through how to put an application through CI/CD, and you saw some stuff in action, right? But I think we might have taken a step forward too early, and hence your suggestion to take us back to, let's get it installed first. Let's see how you install Jenkins X and go from there. So I want to introduce you to, today, Viktor, my colleague, is going to drive this. So I'm going to hand it over to him and kick things off. And let's go.
Okay, cool. Oh, I was supposed to change slides while you were talking, right? Okay,
yeah,
there you go. There you go. Okay, cool. So where was I? Let me set up my screen. Cool. You can see me. You can see my screen. Brilliant. So setting up, installing, updating, upgrading, destroying, and all those things around Jenkins X. So there are quite a few ways how we can install and afterwards manage Jenkins X. One of those is in case you have already a Kubernetes cluster up and running, and basically your platform is all set up, and all you want to do is install Jenkins X. Then you can do a very simple command, jx install, and that command will install Jenkins X, right? Now, of course, that command itself is usually not enough. You would need to specify some arguments. There are quite a few arguments, as you can see, like what is the provider? Is it running in OpenShift or AKS, EKS, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So a bunch of commands you can use to fine-tune your setup. And once you execute jx install together with some commands, you wait for a few minutes, and Jenkins X is up and running. Now, alternative to that is to say, okay, look, you know what? I don't have Jenkins X up and I don't have a cluster at all. I have nothing. I'm a poor person. Nothing. I want not only to install Jenkins X, but I want to to create a cluster, installing the side of that cluster Kubernetes and everything that is needed as a base for Jenkins X, and then on top of all that, install Jenkins X. In that case, the command would be jx create cluster and specify some provider like GKE or EKS or this or that, and some arguments, for example, and off you go. You click enter key and you wait for 10 minutes and you have a full-blown Kubernetes cluster in your favorite provider up and running with Jenkins X on top of it. Now, that's basically awesome, right? You can have a single command that will do everything from creating a cluster, setting up Kubernetes, and installing Jenkins X, right? Oscar, is that awesome? Tell me.
That is pretty darn awesome. And I'd just like to add that
that's horrible. That's horrible. I caught you off guard. Don't do that.
Oh,
ever.
He's trying to trick me. I see what's going on. Is that kind of day?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. That's the day, exactly.
Well, so, I'd like to mention a couple of things though, because I think people should know that you don't have to provision it this way, right? Your cluster. If you are using infrastructure as code, you can use Terraform to build your cluster first. Yeah. Okay. All right. See? All right. I'm keeping you on your toes.
There you go. So what I'm really trying to say is that you have commands, a single command to install Jenkins X, or a single command that will create a cluster and install Jenkins X. And that is very tempting and that is very cool. And you will see it in a lot of demos and a lot of workshops and a lot of talks from the community, that's the way how they're creating their cluster. Now, don't do that ever. Never, ever, 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 ever. For a couple of reasons. First of all, people are using those commands, as I said, in talks, demos, and so on and so forth, simply because it's very fast, it's very easy, and so on and so forth. But it is a bad idea. And it is a bad idea because what we are trying to propagate with Jenkins X in general are GitOps principles. So the idea behind everything happening in, around, on top, below, and so on and so forth, Jenkins X, is that everything is stored in Git. Git is the only source of truth. When you want to change the state of anything inside of your cluster, you push changes to Git, and those changes will trigger a webhook. It will notify the cluster that something needs to be done, and then something will be done. So GitOps principles. Unless you ask me direct questions, I will assume that you understand what GitOps is. So I'm going to skip lengthy description of GitOps, and we're going to jump into the preferable way how to install Jenkins X in accordance with the principles I just mentioned, GitOps, and so on and so forth. So instead of executing any command to install Jenkins X or create a cluster and install Jenkins X, what we're going to do, or what I am going to do, and you're seeing me do, is I'm going to, wrong command. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to visit this GitHub repository. And this GitHub repository contains, think of it as a template for Jenkins X installation. All the files are there, right? All the files that you will need to set up Jenkins X, to set up Nexus, to set up Tekton, to set up Proud, to set up all the components of everything is in this repo. And normally what you would do, what you should do, is fork it first. You always fork a repo, no matter what you do, right? So I'm going to fork it myself. It will take a second. And now that I forked the repo, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to clone it, right? Git clone, here is the, I have it all, notes, commands, I can copy and paste so that it looks like I know what I'm doing. So I'm cloning a repo in my own, on my own laptop, and I'm going to go inside of that cloned repository, and now I'm going to show you a single file. I mean, there are quite a few files, but this file is all that matters. That is a JX requirements YAML file, which is, think of it in a similar way as, in a way it is similar to Helm values. It defines all the components, all the parameters to to be more precise, all the important components and parameters in a file. And normally, since this is a blank slate now, you would modify this file to suit your purpose, right? Your use case. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to modify that same file. We're going to change a few things, like, for example, what is the name of my cluster? The name of my cluster is JXBoot. I created a cluster before this started. Just I didn't want to bother you with details of creating a cluster. I assume that you know how to create a cluster, Kubernetes cluster. So what else? Environment Git owner. I'm going to be the owner of the Git repositories and project. In this case, I'm running in Google Cloud, GKE. It could be something else. But in case of Google Cloud, I need to specify a project. A provider is going to continue being GKE. And zone is US East 1. Actually, it is a bit of maybe a wrong name, because depending on the context, it's either zone or a region. In this case, I'm specifying a region, US East 1. So that's kind of cool. What else should I or can I change? For example, if I go to secret storage, by default, it was set to local. What that means is that all the secrets, passwords, API tokens, and so on and so forth by default would be stored on your laptop. Now, that's a very bad idea, because your laptop does not work well when you have a team, when you work in a company, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is change the secret storage to Vault. And that will be a signal for Jenkins X that it should install HashiCorp Vault in your cluster, among many, many other components. And from there on, every time you put the secret anywhere in any of the files, that will be extracted and it will be stored in Vault, so that what we have in a Git repository represents the single source of truth, but without secrets. It would be kind of silly to keep secrets in GitHub, right? In this case, GitHub. So yep. What else? A few other changes I'm going to do is, for example, there is a section about storage. Do we want to enable storage of certain types of files or no? Like, for example, logs. Do we want to store them somewhere? Do we want to store reports somewhere? And do we want to store the files of a repository somewhere as well? So I'm going to say yes to all of them, or to be more precise, I'm going to say true. Yes, I want to enable log storage, I want to enable reports, and I want to enable repository. True. Okay, so that's enough of the changes. I could change a few other things, like, for example, if you would be using traditional Jenkins instead of static serverless Jenkins, you could change this webhook to Jenkins. Or if you're using something that is not GitHub, you can change it to Lighthouse, so on and so forth. Or, for example, this one, it set Kaniko to true. You might want to not build your images with Kaniko, and then you would set to false. I could have specified the domain if I had any, and specify my TLS information, so on and so forth. So you are in control what will be installed as part of the Jenkins X platform and under which conditions. So I'm going to keep this as is with the changes I made so far. And what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to execute JXBoot. So that is a single command that will do everything required to do based on this requirements file that I just edited and a few other files that are in this repository that define some additional parameters, components, and so on and so forth.
Hey, Victor.
Yes.
I just wanted to probably do a little comparison, right? You know, and many folks may be aware of Terraform. This is akin to saying Terraform apply, you know, where you want to execute what the Terraform files have in place that you've modified. Now you're just saying, let's execute this. And also, I'd like to bring up that this type of configuration is pretty much just like Terraform behaves, right? You make a change in a resource, then that's the only thing that changes when you execute the command. So
exactly. With additional, if I might say, with additional benefits, at least compared to Terraform as is without additional projects. First of all, is that I'm going to execute JXBoot soon, which will apply this definition to the cluster. But from there on, next time I want to change anything, and I will show you that later, that will not be done by me executing a command. All future changes will be done by pushing a change to a Git repository, and that change being propagated throughout the cluster. So I will actually, this should be the first and the last time I execute a command that will result in a change of the state of the cluster. And the reason why I need to do it the first time and never again is because right now there is nothing in my cluster. So if I would just push things to Git repository, and if webhook would notify the cluster, still there would be no entity inside of the cluster to perform the required actions. But after I set up Jenkins X, from there on, all the changes to the definition of Jenkins X or anything else will be done not by executing commands, but by pushing things to GitHub. Anything else, Oscar, or shall I?
No, I think this is great. One thing I'd like to remind folks, like you said earlier, right? So hence the GitOps, right? After you execute this, all of the configuration stored on GitHub in this case, and all of the changes go through a pull request, even though you execute the JX boot, right?
Yeah. So actually, you will never execute JX boot again, ever. Only the first time.
Okay.
So cool. I'm going to run this and let's see what happens. It is cloning the versions. So we have a special repository where we keep versions of all the components. It validated some things. And the first question really is whether I really want to continue doing what I'm doing or no. And the default answer is no. Basically, what it is telling me is that, hey man, look, you did not enable TLS. It's not a good idea. You should not really create a cluster that is accessible without HTTPS. Do you really want to continue? Now, I'm going to be evil and say yes, simply because I don't have a special domain for this demonstration. Otherwise, in the real world scenario, I would definitely say yes, abort this, or no, I don't want to continue. I'm going to set up TLS. But anyways, and now what is happening is that it is validating whether my my Jenkins X JX CLI is latest, and it detected that there is actually a newer version than the one I'm running. It is asking me whether it should update my CLI. So this is nothing to do with the cluster at the moment. It's just getting me the latest command line interface JX CLI installed, and this aborts the pipeline. Simply because that same binary had to be aborted and so that it could be installed. So I'm going to run JX boot again, this time with the latest CLI, and then we're going to see what happens. Okay, it's connected to a cluster. It already validated that everything is configured correctly. It is checking the versions. It asks me again whether I want to continue. I'm going to say yes. And now it should start doing the stuff. And the stuff is, the first question is, I specify that I want to keep logs somewhere, right, in external storage. But I did not specify the address of my external drive. I could have done that, but I didn't. And since it detected that I do want to store it somewhere, but I didn't say where, it is asking me whether I would like to create a new bucket only for that. And I'm going to say yes. And then it's going to repeat the question and ask me, okay, so you don't have a place where to store reports, I think are next. Do you want to create a new bucket for that as well? And I'm going to say yes. As I said before, it is generating new buckets. It could have been, I could have specified them myself. I could have created them myself, but I didn't. I'm lazy. And the last one is for repository, chart repository. That's where your charts, Helm charts will be stored. And I think that this is the last question I will be asked in a while. Now it will start doing everything it needs to do. Like it just created a service account. it is right now it is installing some custom resource definitions that are extending Kubernetes with all the Jenkins X custom resources.
Created the buckets too, I see. Right.
Yeah, buckets are there. Installed Valero. Valero is one of the components. If we could enable with a single, yeah, exactly, with a single parameter, we could enable backups and could schedule their frequency, and now it is doing something else.
Yep. This is pretty cool,
sure,
right? So you know the YAML that is showing in blue right now, is that what is executing? Is that the portion that is actually handling, Victor?
Correct. So so this, what you're seeing here is one of the files in that repository, right? So in the JX requirements that I modified, over there you have like kind of most important parameters, variables, but then you can fine tune things by going to different directories. And let me show you actually that. Here we go. Let me actually open in a bigger font. Okay, here we go. Just Valero, was it right? This one. I think it's here. It's not here. Then it's in system. Valero, here you go.
Right. These are all charts, right?
Yeah, those are all charts. So this is a Valero that is doing backup that you saw in the output is defined here. So every chart has its own, every component has its own directory. And then if you would like to fine tune it, then you would use values file. These are the values that can be used. Now, unlike the traditional Helm values file, we extended Helm to allow some form of templating. So actually, this is not the end result. This is just the template that is converted afterwards to the real deal. For example, here you can see that the values are different depending on whether it's GKE or AWS or Azure. But yeah, every component is configurable separately. Jenkins X tends to come with same defaults, let's say, which you can modify and configure to suit your needs. And right now we are installing Nginx Ingress, which is yet another chart.
Hey, Victor, I have a quick question folks might be interested in. Let's say for this Valero component, right? It's its own chart. We included it in the folder structure here. And now,
yes,
as an ops person, I'm looking to configure the backups for Valero. Do I go to the chart or do I go to the requirements YAML file that we're working with?
No, you would go to the values file inside of the component. So Valero, here you go. Let me see, Valero backups, right? Values YAML, and here are some values, and then you can modify them and add whatever you want.
We can add our own custom stuff. Very much like the principle of charts, right? We're not trying to make the user change the way they do things. You're reusing that knowledge with, if you know how to use Helm. Okay, good.
Exactly. This is good. Ask me more questions because I'm out of inspiration. We need I predict 7 minutes until this is 5 to 7 minutes until this is finished. So shoot.
Yep. Okay.
Oscar,
so
ask me something.
Yeah. So continuing with the thought of using your existing skills, this skill set that we're talking about right now is Helm, right? So if I know Helm, I know the principles of using the values file YAML to augment the configuration. So if you're using JX boot, we're saying you're gonna reuse those skills. You don't have to learn anything new. All you need to do is really familiarize yourself with the folder structure of the JX boot config repo, and then start tweaking it and doing what you need to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And but as always think twice before you're changing, because defaults tend to be good, and those things that are most commonly changed they're extracted into JX requirements, right? So for example, you can specify in JX requirements Velero, the storage where Velero will store backups.
Right. Well, what about, I guess you're saying the recommendation is try to stick with defaults, but many companies do have particular stuff that they need to change. For instance, and I think this one's obvious, right? The domain, like we want to use a custom domain. That should be easily doable via the YAML file, the requirements YAML file that we saw.
Exactly. In requirements YAML, let me see. While waiting. JX requirements, you need to change the domain you said, you put it here, and it would be whatever you want it to be.
Right. So for instance,
assuming that you own the domain.
Yeah. And many companies do, right, have that. So for instance, in my case, I've configured this with my domain and I just type like SharePointOscar.com. That's it. There's no subdomain. It's just that, right?
Yeah. So you specify, I mean, it could be domain, subdomain, anything you want. And then by default, all the applications will be a subdomain of the domain you specified. Like, I don't know.
Right. As long as you have control over your DNS.
Nexus.SharePoint.Oscar.
Yeah, I said, as long as you have control over your DNS records, then you're able to change it to whatever you want.
Yes. Actually, it's even more than that because what you can, let me go back there. If you specify here where, let me find it. So you specify, if this keeps being false, then you control the DNS yourself. You specify, you point your domain to the load balancer of your cluster, and Jenkins X will do the rest. If you change this to true, then actually DNS entries of your domain will be changed for you as well. Now that has limited reach at the moment. I think that it works only with major cloud providers like Azure, AWS, and Google, I think.
So here's a quick question then. Just kind of recapping what we've gone through, right? We saw two ways of configuring and installing Jenkins X. One, the CLI, which obviously we are saying the new thing is using JX boot, what we call JX boot, which is essentially executing the JX boot. Now you mentioned one thing. You said only execute JX boot once, and thereafter, how do I make changes after that? Is the question.
By pushing, right? Okay, I'm gonna, after this is finished, once I have it operational, remind me of that question so that I can show you in action instead of talking about it. How does that sound?
That's how we roll, man. Yeah, I love it.
That's excellent.
I'm jotting it down because my memory sucks too.
Hey, Victor, I got some questions coming in too.
Yes, please.
I've been sifting through them, so I apologize if you answered one and I missed it while I was reading these. But here's one. Are the changes that you made in the UI for storage saved in the JX requirements YAML?
I did not change. If you can rephrase that question, I did not change anything in any UI. I changed it only in JX requirements. I use Vim for that. I don't know whether that's what you mean by UI, but I changed it only in JX requirements, nowhere else. Oh, sorry. Now I think I'm getting the question. So when I execute, I changed it only in JX requirements, but then when I executed JX boot, assuming that that's what you mean by UI, it asked me questions like, oh, where do you want to, if you want to enable it, where do you want to store it? Click enter and I will create it for you. And you will see the result of that question once this is finished. Assuming I might have misunderstood, so please rephrase it if I did. More while waiting.
Yeah, sure. How about besides Vault, what other options support secret storage?
At the moment, out of the box, Vault and local. Local means being on your laptop, right? Which is a bad idea. So
Which
the moment it's only
testing.
Vault, yeah, or not even that. It is designed to be extensible. So when I say we, I mean community, came up with Vault simply because Vault is by far the most commonly used secret storage in Kubernetes today. But it can easily be extended to anything else. And if you have trouble extending it with your own, whichever you're using, drop me an email. I will do my best to help you out. So it's extendable. We just need more use cases. At the moment, it's only Vault and local. And speaking of the level, Vault is installing right now. Shoot, more.
All right, let's keep going. Oh, and just to confirm, it looks like you did answer that previous question correctly.
Yeah.
All right. He gets 2 points.
Is there an integration, or what about the integration with GitLab as a source code repository?
Yes. So let me show you that. Let's go back to this one. So webhook here is defaults to Prow. Now, very quick history lesson. Prow is open source project which we adopted, and Prow was designed by Kubernetes community for their internal purpose. And basically, it serves like some kind of lightweight API gateway to your webhooks. And anyways, the problem with Prow is that it is used internally by Kubernetes community, and they don't have real interest to extend it beyond GitHub. So we tried doing some pull requests and so on and so forth. That failed. So what we did is build an alternative to Prow, which is called Lighthouse. So and Lighthouse will do the same thing that Prow does, but extended beyond GitHub, meaning GitLab, GitHub Enterprise, Bitbucket, and what's not. So the short answer to your question, if you want to use something that is not GitHub, just change the webhook from Prow to Lighthouse, and that's about it. You will actually, and you will be asked during the boot which Git provider you use and things like that. So just change Prow to Lighthouse.
And hey, Victor, can you tell us a little bit about Lighthouse? Like, is that something created by whom, I guess?
So Lighthouse is, in a way, functionally mirrors Prow at the beginning. Later on, it will be extended. And it is both Prow and Lighthouse are, let's say, applications that serve two purposes. One is to be entry point for your webhooks, and the other one is to provide GitOps features. But functionally, they are very, very similar. The major difference is that Lighthouse supports almost every Git provider, while Prow doesn't. Was that your question, Oscar? I'm too old. I forget the question in the middle.
It's okay. I'll remind you. Don't worry. That's why we're here together, man. I was asking actually, who made Lighthouse? Who
the Jenkins X community.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's good to know, right? Yeah.
Now, if you want names and social security numbers, we'll need to do it offline.
Yeah, I don't need that because we don't want to compromise anyone at this point.
Yeah, it's a project. Let's say Jenkins X sub project, though. I mean, it's a separate project from Jenkins X, but it's done by Jenkins X community.
And are folks able to contribute to it if they need to enhance it?
Everything we do is open. Not everything. Everything I'm showing you today is open source. You can contribute as much as you want, and please do contribute. Yeah. Don't take only. Put something back.
Give back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pay it forward, right? Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So this is still running. You know, like 10 years ago, if I would get the operational cluster in 3 weeks, I would be a happy person. Now I'm getting nervous after 10 minutes. Yeah. Now 10 minutes and I'm already getting impatient. Okay, any more questions while waiting?
Yeah, we got more, don't worry.
Okay.
Can you briefly go over the difference between JX and JX boot?
So JX is a CLI and JX boot is one of the commands of the JX binary, JX CLI. So from operational perspective, it's just one of the commands of JX. Now JX boot specifically, that specific command or subcommand, what it does is that it runs a pipeline locally. And actually the major challenge why we didn't have this from the very beginning is a chicken and egg problem, is that we want to manage everything through Git, right? Everything through changes in Git, and those changes trigger a pipeline in a cluster, and that pipeline does something. Now, the reason why I said chicken and egg problem is that how do you have a pipeline that will create a pipeline if that pipeline does not exist to create itself, right? So we managed to make at least the important parts of Jenkins X pipelines run locally, both locally and in a cluster. So first time I'm running Jenkins X boot, right now it is running a local pipeline, or it was running a local pipeline. Actually, it is still running a local pipeline, and that will convert, that will do whatever pipelines do. And from there on, that same pipeline will be running from inside of the cluster. So in other words, think of JX boot as being equivalent of a pipeline, but running locally instead of from the cluster.
Yep. Hey, Victor, can you show that file that actually defines the pipeline? Because we also have it in the JX boot config repository,
Yes.
right?
Yes. I'll do that in 15 seconds.
Excellent. Yeah, some people may want to modify that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll show that in this is now very end. We're almost finished with installing Jenkins X. And then I can show you. I'll show you the pipeline. I'll show you everything.
Awesome.
Come on, hurry up.
Victor, you want another one while we're waiting?
Yes, please do.
Sure. I think this one will be one you like. But real quick before we do, just a few people have asked, and just to reiterate, we are recording, so don't worry about that.
Yes.
You will be able to do this again later on. Anyway, back to the tech talk. Hi, is there any way to install Jenkins X with Helm operators or native Kubernetes resources?
I'm not sure what native Kubernetes resource. What do you mean by native Kubernetes resources? But basically, everything Jenkins X related is either a pod or one of the standard, let's say, Kubernetes resources or one of the custom defined resources. Right. But everything inside there is just pure Kubernetes, nothing else.
All right, let's go on to this next one here. So this might be one you want to address later, but let's throw it out there now. We have a question kind of about a how-to for upgrading the platform, you know, JX version plus JX upgrade platform. How do you do that?
Yep. I'll show that later.
Okay. All right, let's see. Is Jenkins X running on Kubernetes or on Minikube?
Minikube is Kubernetes. So Jenkins X can run theoretically on any Kubernetes, and Minikube is just one way to run Kubernetes. Now, of course, Minikube is on your laptop, so you don't want to run any serious, production installation, but for practicing, it might be a good idea, except that there is a tiny problem. So first, the short answer, yes, Jenkins X can run on Minikube, among others. The problem with Minikube is that Minikube does not give you a publicly accessible IP. A Minikube cluster cannot be accessed from outside your laptop. And the problem with that is that most of the features of Jenkins X are based on Git webhooks notifying the cluster about something. So if that Git is running outside of your laptop, let's say github.com, then it will try to trigger some action in Jenkins X, and it will never manage to do that because Minikube is not accessible from outside your cluster. Outside your laptop. But other than that problem, yes, it runs in Minikube or any other Kubernetes.
For our example, though, just to clarify, we're using Google Cloud, right? So GKE for today.
Yeah, today I'm using GKE, but I'm not showing you anything specific to GKE.
Right.
Jenkins X should work everywhere. Now, that being said, it is not validated to work everywhere, right? There are different levels of validations and effort into that. So I cannot guarantee that there is not a bug somewhere, but generally speaking, it does or should work in any Kubernetes cluster, no matter what, which flavor it is. So now that this is finished, let me show you a few files. Those files were created by the process. So for example, env parameters define some parameters like what is the admin user, whether Docker is enabled, always keep it false. What is the user for executing pipelines, and what is the token for prow. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is that if you look at the values of those parameters, you will see that there is no token, there is no password. All those values are references to Vault, right, in this specific case. And so that this file is safe to be pushed to Git without revealing any confidential information to anybody, right? So there you go. That was a quick example of Vault. Now, Oscar was so kind to ask about the pipeline. So this is Jenkins X YAML, and it's on a big side. So this is Jenkins X YAML that defines the pipeline for installing and upgrading and modifying and doing anything you want with Jenkins X itself. And this is basically the same pipeline as pipelines of your application. So any other Jenkins X pipeline, sorry, when I say the same, obviously contents of this file are different, but it's the same format of the pipeline. And you can see that actually the whole process of installation is just running a pipeline with some steps like, okay, validate whether the version of the Git is correct, validate whether everything looks okay before the installation, install some custom resource definitions, do this, install Velero, do this, do that, right? So this is a typical Jenkins X pipeline. It's just that somebody went out of their way to create pipeline that works out of the box, which you can extend if you want. If you want to do something special, yeah, you can just extend it. This is pipeline like pipeline of any other pipeline in Jenkins X.
Yep.
Also,
in fact,
yeah,
the file, Victor, just wanted to highlight on the root of the directory. I think this file is called Jenkins-X.yaml.
Yeah, it's
right?
Jenkins X YAML. This one, yes.
So it's very similar to when you import your application, like we did last webinar, and that's the file you modify.
Now, if you go back to JX requirements, the one that I modified at the very beginning, what you will see is that it injected some additional information. So instead of, because some things the boot needed to figure out during the process, and instead of just figuring out and applying those things, it made sure that all those things that it figured out are stored in this file and stored in Git repository as well, right? So for example, I did not specify a domain, so Jenkins X gave me a domain and stored the information in this file. Or for example, if you remember, I enabled logging, storage for logs, but I did not specify the URL of where the logs will be stored. So it created the storage for me and it stored the address in Jenkins X YAML. So what I'm really trying to say is that it always modifies the file if you don't do it instead of just running some random stuff. Now, what is also important, and this is if you are a Jenkins X user and you did not use boot, this is new, right? So these are my current pipelines in my cluster, right? And normally when you create a cluster with some other method, you get production and staging environments, but there was no pipeline for the dev environment before. So basically this pipeline, this is the pipeline that is controlled by Jenkins X that I just showed you, that is controlled by changes to the Git repository that I just modified.
Even though it says it never executed, but we did. right?
Yeah, so ignore those two columns because that's the leftover from static Jenkins X. So this will always say not available no matter what you do.
Right.
It's undocumented feature.
By design. It's by design.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do next is, now going back to what you, Oscar, said, I'm going to make a change to the Git repository. I'm just going to make a change to this README file simply because it's the fastest one. Doesn't matter what I'm changing for this argument. What matters is that I change something to my Git repository, the one that defines my platform, the Jenkins X. I'm going to commit this change and ignore the message. And I'm going to push the change to the Git repository, right? So I modified something in this repository and pushed it to GitHub, right? That's all I did. And this is now the answer to your question, Oscar. Why did I say that you run JXBoot only once, right?
Yes.
So if I look at all the activities of the dev environment, you see that a new one is running. So basically, from now on, whenever I want to change any aspect of Jenkins X, what I'm gonna do is change any of the files in this repository, push them to GitHub, and let Jenkins X manage itself by running its own pipeline. So this pipeline basically is the same pipeline. So this is, I'll get back to you, Oscar, in a second. So when I run JXBoot, what I run is this pipeline. The only difference between what you're seeing on the screen right now and when I executed Jenkins X boot is that first time I run the pipeline locally, and now the same pipeline is running in a cluster. In both cases, it is based on the Git repo. And sorry, Oscar, I interrupted you.
No worries.
Continue.
Actually, that's really good info. I actually wanted to bring something up that we might need to update ourselves on the documentation and throughout our user channels in Kubernetes. It appears that we're saying execute JXBoot anytime you need to make a change. But you are telling me today, I don't need to do that. I can actually directly modify the files in the repository, the dev repository. Correct. In this case. I could do either, or should I only do one? Which one should I do?
No, do only apply GitOps. Whenever you want to change something anywhere, push a change to some Git repository, right?
In this case, our dev.
Run JXBoot first time because simply the first time there was no Jenkins X to do the work inside of the cluster. That's why I had to run it only once.
Got it.
And one more thing. This is very, very, very important, Oscar. Whenever there is a discrepancy between what I say and what documentation say, I'm always right.
Okay, noted. Thank you. I will take note of that.
Yep. Put a reminder.
I thought my wife was always right. Then she was the only one, but I guess now I have to include you on the list, huh?
Exactly. There is one person for you right on each continent.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, well, so
yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this clarifies it a lot, even for me, to be honest with you, Victor, because I was using boot a few days ago, and I actually continued using JXBoot, the CLI command, once I made a change to the requirements YAML file. But I'm not going to do that anymore because, yeah.
There is one use case where that's a good idea. No, that's the only option. If you specify local storage,
right,
then you must run it locally always. Simply because if you push it to Git and start the pipeline in a cluster, and that pipeline doesn't have your secrets,
right,
because they're local to your laptop, then you would need to run it locally always.
Good to know.
Other than that, you're golden.
In the first place, you shouldn't even have your secrets locally, though, like you said. So. Right.
Yeah, but I don't know, maybe for some reason or other you do. If you do, then just don't do that. So let me show you the environments. Now, those of you familiar with Jenkins X, you're probably familiar seeing this thing, that there is a development, staging, and production environment. And you're probably familiar that staging and production were controlled by repositories. what you're not familiar with, if you did use Jenkins X before, is that this field, this column was empty in the past because you were setting up Jenkins X by running some random commands. Now, this basically tells you that this is the repository that controls the dev environment, and dev environment is Jenkins X. And that's all I have prepared. Yeah, actually, just one very quick thing.
After you have that, I have one more thing on these environments, by the way, just a quick question for folks.
Let me see. So for example, if you execute this command, and I think this deserves the whole session, so I will not go into details, but you can extend the Jenkins X by adding apps. Like for example, in this example, I would add Istio, right? And what this command does is that this will not install anything inside of your cluster. Nothing, zix, nada. What this command will do is that it will modify the contents of the dev repository, and that will trigger a pipeline. So basically, any application you add to your Jenkins X installation will be a change to the repository that I showed you. I was showing you last half an hour. And now we have time for more questions from Oscar or somebody else.
I'll just ask one, and then of course I want to hear from folks. In that view that you just erased on your terminal, by the way, the environment.
This one? Yeah.
Yes. One thing that caught my eye, and perhaps folks might be interested in knowing, when we last seminar or last webinar, we promoted an app and it automatically went into staging. That was, I just wanted to highlight, it seems that the promote property or column here is set to auto for the staging environment. But we noticed that in production, a good practice is to set it to manual like it is right now, right? Because some folks may have approvals in place after management reviews the web UI for your app, then it can be manually triggered, right?
Yeah.
So I think I just wanted to highlight that so folks know we didn't do that last time. I wanted to make sure we captured that today.
Yeah, I mean, that can be a subject of the next session.
Absolutely. Let's hear from folks what we have, Max, if we have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a follow-up to one from before. I misread it when the Minikube question. The question wasn't K8s or Minikube. The question was, will it run on K3s or Minikube?
Never tried it. That's an honest answer.
Yeah, but it is Kubernetes, so technically it could.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So I never give an answer to something I haven't tried. So I don't like speculating. It's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But okay, if you because I'm of forgetful nature, I'm too old to remember stuff. If you ping me or Oscar on Slack, we can do an experiment and try it out.
Yep.
And that's when I say we can do experiment, I mean Oscar will do it.
Delegation. I love that delegation.
And in just a moment, I'll actually put my email in the chat for everyone. And if there's anything we don't get to or you are looking for more information on, just send me an email on it, and I'll get you in touch with Viktor and Oscar as well.
Yep. And before you come to more questions, if there are any, we decided we had an idea about what should be in each episode, and we dropped through those ideas to trash because you started asking us in the first session what you would like to see next, and one of the questions was installation. So please keep coming with us with the questions. What would you like to see next, instead of us trying to figure out what to show you next?
Yeah, this is a good time to figure that out too, right? Like, what do you want to see next?
Absolutely. You can either put that, for everyone watching, if you have things you want to know more about, you can either put that in the question here, or in a couple minutes when I close this out and that survey comes up, there'll be a question for that there as well. All right, let's go on to this next one. So in regards to Jenkins X, are there any plans for creating a UI management?
Good that you asked. but I'm not allowed to tell you. Look, follow Jenkins X. You will see some really, really big announcements on that subject very, very soon. Very,
Yeah,
very soon. That's
yeah,
all
that's
I'm
a
gonna
good.
say.
I'll
And
I'll add to.
I'm talking. I know that Oscar is about to say something he shouldn't, so I'm just taking care of him.
I always do that though. You know me. Well, actually, I'll say one thing. We have a Jenkins X newsletter, and I think that the best place to get some of that insight would really be there, right? I'm actually working on our next one already, and I promise to give you shed some light on the status of that. So if you subscribe, I don't have the link unfortunately, but maybe we'll give it to you, Max, at some point. We can put it in there.
Sure. It's
Yeah,
coming very, very soon.
yeah. But it is, the UI is something that is everyone's asking. We can tell you where something will come very soon. Um,
All
How
right.
do we have more, Max?
Yeah, we sure do. All right, so this next one, just so everyone knows, if you can't guess already, I'm not a particularly technical person. The question's a little above my knowledge. I'm going to read it exactly as is for you, Victor.
Okay.
Why has Jenkins X decided to do an abstraction with JX? Usually other tools share operators, deployments, services, etc. Searching on the internet, I always find setup instructions with JX.
So why did JX decide? So I'm not, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure I understood the question. If the question is why does JX abstract something, the answer is that yes, in some cases JX, if we assuming that we are talking about CLI, not JX running in cluster, if we're talking about CLI, yes, in some cases it is a wrapper or abstraction around something like JX repo would open your GitHub repository in browser, right? So, or there are some wrappers around Hub and so on and so forth. So in some cases it's wrappers which were done mostly for our own convenience. But most of abstractions add some additional values on top of something. Like a good example, even the example I'm going to say is actually not from CLI, but from cluster. Like for example, we extended. You can say that we are abstracting or wrapping Helm, which is partly true, but we are also doing that because we're extending it with some additional capabilities. So in some cases it's a wrapper, but in most cases it's because we needed to extend something. And also because we wanted to give a simple to use experience. Like for example, a good example is JX get env. This command gives you this. Now you don't need to use that command. You can do kubectl get environments, I think. Here. You can do this, right? This is because environments are CRD, and you can do that and you get similar output. Actually, this was now unlucky because in some cases you would get much less user-friendly output depending on what you're watching. But yes, everything Jenkins X is 100% pure Kubernetes. So you could do everything without JX, with kubectl or Helm or this or that. It's just convenience in some cases, and some others it is additional functionality. Any other questions?
Yep. So I think we have time for one, maybe two more. But everyone, please keep them coming because we can collect them after the fact and reach out. So if you think of them, please keep them coming. Let's do this one first. To add to the GitLab questions, will Lighthouse also work with Bitbucket or any Git server for that matter?
I can never say any because that could be potentially unlimited. But yes, with all the major Git servers like GitLab, Bitbucket, this or that, all the major ones, including Gitea, kind of less major ones, right? So yes, with any Git provider that it has decent usage, yes, the answer is yes.
All right, let's do one more real quick before we sign off. unless you feel it's going to be too long of an answer, how can we upgrade from an older installation of JX install to JX boot?
I'm not 100% sure. So what I'm about to say might not be correct, but I don't think that there is an easy way to do it. I think that now Jenkins X is very lightweight in terms of memory and CPU used in a cluster. It's very, very, very lightweight. So you might be able to do it, but I think it would be too much work. Personally, if I would be in that situation, I would just create a separate Jenkins X setup in the same cluster in a different namespace and import all my projects, and I would be done in like 20 minutes. While trying to upgrade from before boot to boot might take much, much, much more. So I would suggest setting up a separate installation with Jenkins X boot and just import your projects, and that's about it. And then you can delete the old one.
It's like a gradual migration too, so you get the benefit of running both in parallel until you fully migrate.
Yeah.
All right. That's about it we have for time for today. Like I said, please shoot me an email if you have any other questions we missed, or if we missed them here, we can always reach out after the fact. I am collecting them all. That survey is going to pop up in just a minute to see what you thought and what you'd like to learn more about. In the meantime, Oscar, Victor, do you have any parting words?
I'll just say thank you for attending our second one, and we're excited to continue our series. And please do let us know what you want to see on the next one. We're happy to tailor our content to what you want. So thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. That survey is about to pop up, and we'll talk to you all again real soon. Thanks, Victor and Oscar.
Bye.
Thank you.